He was here with my wife. In my bed.
The phone call that destroyed my life came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right when I was finally drifting off after another 14-hour day of fixing other people's broken homes. Ironic, considering I couldn't fix my own. "Dean, honey, can you get that?" Julia mumbled from her side of our king-sized bed, the one we'd bought 3 years ago when we still pretended to care about sleeping close to each other. I'm exhausted from the Henderson wedding prep. Sure she was. Julia Harlan, Austin's premier event planner, was always exhausted from something. Usually something that kept her out until midnight 3 nights a week, leaving me to handle homework duty with Emma and Zoe while she networked with clients who apparently only met in dimly lit wine bars. I grabbed the phone without checking the caller ID. Big mistake. "Harlan residence," I said, my voice still thick with sleep. Silence, then heavy breathing, then a man's voice, low and intimate. "You left your underwear here again, the red lace ones." My veins turned to ice water. That voice, I knew that voice better than my own. "I can still smell you on them," the voice continued, and I heard a soft laugh in the background. A woman's laugh. My wife's laugh. It was my brother Mark. I sat up slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Julia had rolled over, her auburn hair spread across the pillow, breathing deep and even. Innocent as a sleeping angel. What a joke. "Who is this?" I whispered, though I already knew. God help me, I already knew. "I love you so much, baby," Mark's voice came through the phone, thick with satisfaction. "When can you get away again? I need to taste you." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand for a full minute, my mind racing through the implications like a demolition crew tearing down everything I thought I knew about my life. Julia stirred beside me, and I quickly placed the phone back on the nightstand, my hands shaking. "Who was it?" she asked sleepily. "Wrong number," I managed. She made a soft humming sound and rolled back over. Within minutes, she was breathing deeply again, lost in dreams that probably featured my golden boy brother and his army-trained hands doing things I didn't want to think about. I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift as early morning traffic began filtering past our suburban Austin home, the house I'd built with my own hands, board by board, nail by nail. The house where I'd raised 2 daughters who might not even be mine. The house that had become a monument to my own stupidity. By sunrise, I had a plan. My name is Dean Harlan, and I'm about to tell you how I systematically destroyed the 2 people who meant the most to me in this world. How I took everything they loved and burned it to the ground, legally and completely. How I discovered that revenge, when served properly, doesn't need to be a dish served cold. Sometimes it's best served blazing hot, in front of everyone you know, with cameras rolling. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you about the perfect life I thought I had before that phone call opened my eyes. I run Harlan Construction, a home renovation company I built from nothing after aging out of the foster system at 18. No family money, no connections, just calloused hands and a stubborn refusal to quit when things got tough. We specialize in high-end kitchen and bathroom remodels for Austin's growing population of tech money transplants who want their McMansions to look like something out of a magazine. Julia and I met 8 years ago at a charity auction where she was managing the event, and I was donating labor for a Habitat for Humanity build. She was gorgeous, confident, and had this way of making everyone in the room feel like they were the most important person she'd ever met. I fell hard and fast, the way only a guy who grew up without love can fall when someone finally shows him attention. We married 2 years later. Emma was already 6 then, Julia's daughter from a previous relationship that she never talked about much. The father was out of the picture, she'd say whenever I asked, and I respected that. Everyone has baggage. Zoe came along 2 years after our wedding, and suddenly I had the family I dreamed about during all those lonely nights in foster care. Or so I thought. Mark showed up in our lives 3 years ago when he got transferred to Fort Hood, about an hour north of Austin. My baby brother, the one who got adopted by the Harlans when he was 8, while I stayed in the system. The one who became their golden child, their pride and joy, their perfect son who could do no wrong. Don't get me wrong. I was happy for him. Happy he'd found a real family. Happy he'd made something of himself in the army. Happy he wanted to reconnect with his big brother after all those years. The Harlans even started treating me like family once Mark vouched for me. Suddenly I had parents again, or at least people who played parents at family dinners and holidays. Mark was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, naturally charming where I had to work at social situations, effortlessly successful where I'd scraped and clawed for every achievement. Women loved him. Men wanted to be him. Kids gravitated toward him like he was some kind of superhero, including my kids. Emma, my moody 14-year-old who barely grunted at me most days, would light up like Christmas morning whenever Uncle Mark came around. He'd take her to movies, help with her homework, listen to her teenage drama with the kind of patience I could never manage after 12 hours of dealing with contractors and clients. And Zoe, sweet 10-year-old Zoe with her serious eyes and quiet ways, would climb all over him like he was a jungle gym, giggling and chattering about school and friends and all the little things she never seemed to share with me anymore. Julia loved him too. Of course she did. What woman wouldn't love a decorated army officer who looked like he stepped off a recruiting poster and treated her like she was the most fascinating person in the world? I told myself I wasn't jealous. I told myself it was good that my family had someone else to rely on, someone who could be there when my work kept me busy. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be lies. The signs were all there looking back. Julia's mysterious evening meetings that always seemed to coincide with Mark's visits to town. The way she'd dress up for girls' night out, in outfits that would make a dancer blush. The new lingerie that appeared in her dresser drawer, tags still attached, that never made an appearance in our bedroom. Her phone that was suddenly password protected after years of being an open book between us. The way she and Mark would share little looks and inside jokes during family dinners, like they had secrets the rest of us weren't privy to. The fact that our love life had dwindled from occasional to non-existent over the past year, with Julia always having headaches or being too tired or having an early morning meeting. But I was busy. Building a business takes time, and I was working 60-hour weeks trying to establish Harlan Construction as a premium brand in Austin's competitive market. I told myself that all marriages go through rough patches, that Julia was just stressed with her own growing business, that Mark was just being a good brother-in-law by helping out with the kids. I told myself I was paranoid, reading too much into innocent interactions, right up until that phone call proved I wasn't paranoid enough. The next morning, I went through the motions of normal life while my world crumbled around me. Made coffee, scrambled eggs for the girls, kissed Julia goodbye as she headed off to scout venues for an upcoming corporate retreat. She was wearing a sundress that showed off her legs and a perfume I didn't recognize. "Don't wait up tonight," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The client dinner might run late." "Sure thing," I replied, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Have fun." After dropping the girls at school, I drove straight to Troy's office instead of heading to my current job site. Troy LeDuc had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both screwed-up kids trying to figure out how to be adults. He'd gone the law enforcement route, spending 15 years as an Austin PD detective before hanging out his shingle as a private investigator. If anyone could help me figure out what was really going on, it was Troy. His office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service, the kind of place that screamed budget private eye to anyone who watched too many movies. But Troy was good at what he did, and more importantly, he was loyal. "You look like heck," he said, when I walked in without knocking. He was sitting behind his desk, working through a stack of insurance fraud photos, his graying hair sticking up in all directions. "Feel worse than I look," I said, dropping into the chair across from him. "I need your help, and I need you to not ask too many questions until I'm done talking." Troy leaned back, studying my face with the cop instincts that 15 years on the force had burned into his DNA. "This about Julia? How'd you know?" "Because you've got that look guys get when they find out their wives are cheating. Seen it 100 times. Who's the other man?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's the million-dollar question. It's my brother." Troy's eyebrows shot up. "Mark? Jesus, Dean. You sure about this?" I told him about the phone call, about all the signs I'd been ignoring, about the sick feeling in my gut that had been growing for months. Troy listened without interrupting, his expression getting darker with each detail. "Okay," he said when I finished. "What do you want me to do about it?" "I want proof. Real, undeniable, court-admissible proof. And I want to know everything. How long it's been going on, where they meet, what they're planning. Everything. And then I'm going to destroy them both." Troy was quiet for a long moment, drumming his fingers on the desk. "Dean, I've got to ask. You sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better not to know the details. Get a divorce lawyer, split custody, move on with your life." They made it my business when they decided to screw around behind my back in my house around my kids, I said. I want them to pay for what they've done. I want everyone to know what they are. Revenge is expensive and messy, and it has a way of blowing up in your face. I don't care. They destroyed my family. I'm going to return the favor. Troy sighed and opened his desk drawer, pulling out a contract. Okay, but we do this smart. Legal. No breaking and entering, no violence, no stupid moves that land you in jail. Agreed? Agreed. The first piece of evidence came easier than I expected. Troy had me install tracking software on the family computer, the one Julia used for work emails and online shopping. Within 2 days, we had access to a secret email account she'd set up using a variation of her maiden name. The emails made me want to put my fist through a wall. Mark. Can't stop thinking about yesterday. You make me feel alive again. Dee is working late again tonight. Can you get away? J, baby. Wish I could hold you all night instead of these stolen hours. Soon we'll figure out how to be together for real. Love you. M, the way you touched me in the hotel room. I'm getting wet just thinking about it. Meet me at our usual place tomorrow? J. There were dozens of them, going back 8 months. 8 months of planning, scheming, and betraying everything I thought we had together. The worst part wasn't the love. Though reading about my wife's intimate moments courtesy of my brother was like swallowing broken glass, the worst part was how happy they sounded. How much they genuinely seemed to care about each other. This wasn't just a physical affair. They were in love. There's more, Troy said, sliding another folder across his desk. We were meeting at a diner across town, somewhere Julia would never think to look for me. I ran surveillance on both of them for the past week. They've got a regular schedule. The photos made everything real in a way the emails couldn't. Julia and Mark holding hands as they walked into the Driscoll Hotel downtown. Mark's hand on Julia's A as they waited for the elevator. Julia laughing at something Mark said, her face radiant with joy in a way I hadn't seen in years. Every Tuesday and Friday, Troy continued. Same hotel, same room. He pays cash, checks in as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. They usually stay for 2 or 3 hours, then leave separately. I studied the timestamps on the photos. Tuesdays when Julia claimed to have client meetings. Fridays when she said she was having girls' night with her friend Sienna. What about the kids? I asked. Emma and Zoe, I need to know. Troy's expression went carefully neutral. Dean, you sure you want to know this? Tell me. He slid another envelope across the table. I had a contact at a lab run DNA tests, used hair samples from the girls' brushes and a beer bottle Mark left at your house last Sunday. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope. The results were clear and devastating. Emma. 99.7% probability of paternity match with Mark Harlan. Zoe. 99.9% probability of paternity match with Mark Harlan. Neither of my daughters was mine. I sat there staring at the papers while my entire world collapsed around me. 14 years of loving Emma, 10 years of loving Zoe, countless bedtime stories and scraped knees and parent-teacher conferences and dance recitals and soccer games. None of it mattered. They weren't mine. They'd never been mine. How long? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Based on the ages and the timeline I've been able to piece together, Mark's been in Julia's life a lot longer than you know, Troy said gently. That previous relationship she never talked about, I think it was with your brother. Emma was probably conceived during one of his leaves from basic training. And Zoe? Remember that weekend 3 years ago when Julia went to visit her sick aunt in Dallas? The aunt that turned out to be perfectly healthy when you called to check on her, I remembered. Julia had been gone for 4 days, claiming her aunt needed help after surgery. When I'd called the aunt directly to offer assistance, the woman had no idea what I was talking about. Fort Hood is an hour from Dallas, I said numbly. Bingo. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Mark's sudden interest in reconnecting with me hadn't been about brotherly love. It had been about staying close to Julia and the kids. My kids. His kids. There's something else, Troy said. I think they're planning to leave you. I found emails about Mark putting in for a transfer to Fort Carson in Colorado. Julia's been researching event planning companies in Denver. When? Soon. Mark's transfer request goes through next month. Julia's been slowly moving money out of your joint accounts into a personal savings account you don't have access to. I laughed, a bitter sound that made the waitress at the next table look over in concern. So they get everything. The kids, a fresh start, and my money to fund their new life together. Not if we stop them first. How? Troy leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. We make their lives so miserable here that running away starts to look impossible. We destroy their reputations, their careers, their standing in the community. We make sure everyone knows exactly what they are. That's not enough. It's a start. Trust me, Dean. I've seen this kind of thing before. The key is to be systematic, methodical. We take away everything they value piece by piece until they have nothing left but each other. And then we take that away too. I looked at the photos again, at my wife and brother looking so happy together, so confident that they'd outsmarted the stupid husband who was too busy working to notice what was happening under his own roof. When do we start? I asked. Troy smiled, and for the first time in days I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. Dark, twisted hope, but hope nonetheless. We already have. The first move was subtle. I started paying attention. For 3 years, I'd been the oblivious husband, the guy who worked late and trusted his family to handle themselves. Now I became a student of their deception, cataloging every lie, every secret glance, every manufactured excuse. Julia claimed she had a client dinner on Tuesday. I had Troy follow her. She went straight to Mark's apartment off base, carrying an overnight bag and wearing lingerie under her business suit. Mark called to cancel our usual Sunday family dinner, claiming he had duty. I drove past his place and saw Julia's car in the parking lot. Emma asked if she could spend the weekend at her friend Madison's house. When I called Madison's mom to confirm, she had no idea what I was talking about. Emma was with Mark and Julia at a cabin he rented near Lake Travis. They were building their own little family unit, and I was the outsider they had to work around. The knowledge was like acid in my veins, but I forced myself to smile and play along. I became the perfect husband and father, attentive and loving and completely unsuspecting. I brought Julia flowers. I helped Emma with her algebra homework. I took Zoe to her piano lessons and cheered louder than anyone at her recital. And all the while, I planned their destruction. Phase 1 is about gathering ammunition, Troy explained during one of our clandestine meetings. We need enough dirt to bury them both when the time comes. The ammunition came faster than I expected. Troy's contacts in law enforcement ran background checks that revealed Mark had been written up twice for conduct unbecoming an officer, both times for inappropriate relationships with subordinates' wives. Julia's business was being investigated by the IRS for underreporting income from cash payments. More importantly, we discovered their plan. Mark was scheduled to leave for Colorado in 6 weeks. Julia had already given notice to 3 of her biggest clients, claiming she was scaling back to focus on family. The house, my house, the one I'd built with my own hands, was going to be sold. Julia had already contacted a realtor. They were going to take my daughters, my money, and my home, and leave me with nothing but the wreckage of a life I'd thought was real, not if I could help it. The first public move came at Emma's school play. She was performing in the fall drama production, playing Lady Macbeth in a modernized version of Shakespeare's tragedy. Fitting, considering the betrayal and homicide happening in my own life. Julia and Mark sat together in the 3rd row, with me on Julia's other side. To anyone watching, we looked like a happy family supporting our talented daughter. Mark had his arm casually draped over the back of Julia's chair, his fingers occasionally brushing her shoulder in what looked like innocent brotherly affection. During intermission, I stood up and announced loudly enough for half the auditorium to hear, "Mark, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for our family. Julia's told me how much time you've been spending with her and the girls while I'm working. It's so wonderful to have a brother I can trust completely." The words hit their target. Mark's face went pale, and Julia's smile became strained. Several other parents looked over with interest, filing away the information for future gossip. "Of course," Mark said, his voice carefully neutral. "Family comes first?" "Absolutely," I agreed, clapping him on the shoulder hard enough to make him wince. "Family loyalty is everything. I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't trust the people closest to me." Julia excused herself to go to the bathroom and didn't come back until the second act started. When she did return, her makeup was freshly applied and her hands were shaking slightly. Message sent and received. The next move was more direct. I started showing up places unexpectedly. When Julia claimed to have a late meeting with the Henderson wedding client, I arrived at the venue with coffee and sandwiches, playing the devoted husband bringing dinner to his hardworking wife. The venue was empty except for a janitor who told me no one had been there all day. When Mark said he was pulling duty and couldn't make Zoe's soccer game, I called the base and asked to speak with him about a family emergency. The duty officer told me Lieutenant Colonel Harlan was off base for the weekend. When Emma claimed to be studying at the library, I showed up with her favorite snacks and found the librarian who remembered her leaving with her father 2 hours earlier. The description matched Mark perfectly. Each time, I played the confused but understanding family man. Oh, they must have changed plans and forgotten to tell me. You know how busy everyone is these days. But I made sure to ask questions that would be remembered later. I made sure there were witnesses to their lies. The pressure was starting to show. Julia became snappish and defensive, jumping every time her phone rang. Mark started avoiding family gatherings, claiming work obligations that became increasingly implausible. Emma began acting out at school, her grades slipping as the stress of maintaining lies took its toll. Only Zoe seemed unaffected, but then again, she was only 10. She didn't understand the adult games being played around her. The breaking point came at Mark and Julia's favorite restaurant. Troy had been tracking their movements for weeks, and we knew they met every Friday at a small Italian place downtown, the kind of intimate spot where couples went to gaze into each other's eyes over candlelight and wine. I made a reservation for the same night, same time, bringing along my friend Dave from work and his wife Carol. We requested a table with a view of the whole restaurant. Mark and Julia arrived at 7:30, as predictable as clockwork. They were seated at their usual corner table, holding hands across the white tablecloth, completely absorbed in each other. I waited until they'd ordered wine before making my move. "Mark!" I called out, standing up and waving like I'd just spotted an old friend. "What a coincidence! Julia, honey, look who's here!" The look of pure terror that flashed across both their faces was worth every sleepless night I'd endured since discovering their affair. They couldn't run, couldn't hide, couldn't pretend they weren't there together. "Dean," Julia managed, her voice pitched too high. "What are you doing here?" "Date night with Dave and Carol," I said cheerfully, gesturing to my companions who were watching the drama unfold with fascination. "You two having a business meeting on a Friday night?" "We were discussing the surprise party for your birthday," Mark said quickly. "Julia wanted to plan something special." "My birthday's not for 4 months," I replied, still smiling. "But how thoughtful of you both to plan so far ahead. Mind if we join you? I'd love to hear the details." Before they could object, I was already signaling the waiter to move our party to the larger table next to theirs. Dave and Carol, sensing drama, played along perfectly. The next hour was exquisite torture. Mark and Julia tried desperately to maintain the pretense of planning a birthday party, while I asked increasingly detailed questions about their plans. Where would we have it? Who would we invite? What kind of cake did they think I'd like? Every answer they gave contradicted the previous one. They were sweating, stumbling over their words, shooting panicked looks at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. But I was always watching now. By the time we left the restaurant, half the staff and several other diners had witnessed the awkward encounter. Word would spread, questions would be asked. The perfect facade they'd maintained was starting to crack. "That was beautiful," Troy said when I called him later that night. "You've got them rattled. They're going to make mistakes now." He was right. Within a week, the mistakes started coming fast and furious. The mistakes began with Emma. My 14-year-old daughter, Mark's 14-year-old daughter, had inherited her biological father's charm, but not his intelligence. Under pressure, she started slipping up, forgetting which lies she was supposed to tell and when. "Dad, can you pick me up from Madison's house tomorrow after school?" she asked over breakfast on a Tuesday morning. "Sure, sweetheart. What's Madison's address again?" Emma froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. I'll text it to you." "No need," I said casually, buttering my toast. "I'll just call her mom and get directions. What's her last name again?" I'm not sure. Everyone just calls her Madison's mom." Julia jumped in quickly. "I have the number in my phone. I'll send it to you later." But she never did. And when I looked up Madison in Emma's school directory, there were 3 Madisons in her grade, none of whom had ever heard of Emma Harlan. The lies were multiplying faster than they could keep track of them. Mark made his own mistakes. During a family barbecue at my house, the house I'd built, the house they were planning to sell out from under me, he got too comfortable. Julia was helping me in the kitchen when Mark started telling Zoe a story about a camping trip. "Remember when we went to Enchanted Rock last month?" he said, not realizing I was listening from the doorway. "You were so brave when you heard those coyotes howling." Zoe giggled. "That was scary, but you made me feel safe, Daddy. Daddy. Mark's face went white when he saw me standing there. Zoe looked confused, realizing she'd said something wrong, but not understanding what. Uncle Mark makes everyone feel safe, I said smoothly, walking over to ruffle Zoe's hair. That's what family is for, right, sweetheart? Right, Zoe said uncertainly. But the damage was done. Mark had been taking my daughters on secret trips, building relationships and memories that excluded me entirely. And Zoe, innocent 10-year-old Zoe, had started thinking of him as her father. Because he was. That night, after everyone had gone home and the girls were asleep, I confronted Julia directly for the first time. We need to talk, I said, finding her in our bedroom, getting ready for bed. She was wearing a silk nightgown I'd never seen before, probably something she'd bought for her hotel encounters with Mark. The sight of it made my stomach turn. About what? She asked, but her voice was wary. About the fact that you're planning to leave me. Julia went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. The house is going on the market next month. Mark's transferring to Colorado. You've been moving money out of our joint accounts. Should I go on? She turned to face me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. Vulnerable, uncertain, almost apologetic. Then her expression hardened. You're never here, Dean. You work 60 hours a week. You barely talk to me or the girls, and when you're home, you're thinking about the next job. What did you expect? I expected my wife not to sleep with my brother behind my back for 8 months. The words hung in the air between us like a physical blow. Julia's face went pale, then flushed red. Does it matter? The question is, what happens now? Julia sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. Confess everything, beg forgiveness, try to salvage what was left of our marriage. Instead, she lifted her chin and looked me straight in the eye. I love him, she said simply. I've always loved him. Even when I married you, I was thinking about him. The honesty was like a knife to the chest, but I kept my expression neutral. And the girls? They love him too. He's their real father, Dean. He should be the one raising them. So you're just going to take them and disappear, start over in Colorado like I never existed? You can visit. We're not trying to cut you out completely. I laughed, a bitter sound that made her flinch. How generous of you. I can visit my own daughters on weekends in the life you build with my brother using my money. It doesn't have to be ugly, Dean. We can handle this like adults. You're right, I said, standing up. We can handle this like adults. Starting now. I walked to the dresser and pulled out a manila envelope Troy had prepared for me. Inside were copies of all the evidence we'd gathered. Photos, emails, DNA tests, financial records, everything. What's that? Julia asked nervously. Your choices, I said, tossing the envelope onto the bed. Option 1. You call Mark right now and end this. You recommit to our marriage, we go to counseling, and we try to rebuild what you've destroyed. The girls never have to know the truth about their paternity. Julia's hands were shaking as she opened the envelope and saw the photos of her and Mark at the hotel. Option 2, I continued. You keep playing games, and I make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. Your clients, your friends, Mark's commanding officers, the girls' schools, everyone. I'll destroy both your reputations so completely that running away to Colorado will look like a mercy. You wouldn't, she whispered. Try me. Julia stared at the photos for a long time, her face cycling through emotions. Fear, anger, defiance, calculation. Finally, she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, determined, almost cruel. You want to play hardball, Dean? Fine. But remember, I know things about you too. Things that could make your life very difficult. Such as the fact that you've been using undocumented workers on half your job sites. Such as the fact that you've been skimming cash payments to avoid taxes. Such as the fact that you hit Emma last year when she talked back to you. The last accusation hit me like a physical blow. I never touched Emma. Never. That's not what she'll tell people if I ask her to. That's not what the bruise photos I took will show. I stared at her, seeing a stranger wearing my wife's face. You'd destroy your own daughter's relationship with the only father she's ever known? You'd make her lie about misuse that never happened? I'd do whatever it takes to protect my family. My real family. The battle lines were drawn. Julia had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I walked to the door, then turned back. You have 24 hours to change your mind, I said. After that, all bets are off. Julia clutched the photos to her chest like a shield. Bring it on. I smiled, and she actually flinched at the expression on my face. You have no idea what you've just started, I said. But you're going to find out. The war had begun. I didn't wait 24 hours. By noon the next day, copies of Julia and Mark's hotel photos were in the hands of Mark's commanding officer, Julia's 3 biggest clients, and the principal of Emma's school. Not sent anonymously. That would have been cowardly. I signed my name to every single package and included a brief, factual cover letter explaining the situation. The response was immediate and devastating. Mark called me at 2:15, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You son of a witch! Do you know what you've done? Colonel Martinez wants to see me first thing Monday morning. My career is over." "Should have thought of that before you started screwing my wife," I replied calmly. "Actions have consequences, little brother." "This isn't over, Dean. You want to destroy my life? Fine. But I'm taking Julia and the girls with me, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." "We'll see about that." Julia's reaction was more controlled but equally furious. She confronted me that evening when I got home from work, her face flushed with rage. "The Hendersons fired me," she said without preamble. $20,000 in lost revenue because you couldn't handle your marriage problems like an adult. "I tried handling them like an adult," I said, hanging up my jacket. "You chose war instead. How did the other clients take the news?" Her silence told me everything I needed to know. "Let me guess," I continued. "The Patels and the Johnsons also decided they didn't want an event planner who conducts business meetings in hotel beds. Can't say I blame them. You're destroying innocent people's lives. I'm destroying liars and cheaters. There's a difference." Emma chose that moment to walk into the kitchen, her school backpack slung over her shoulder. She looked between Julia and me with the sharp awareness that teenagers develop when their parents' marriage is falling apart. "Everything okay?" she asked carefully. "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Julia said quickly. "Your dad and I were just discussing business." Emma looked at me with those dark eyes. Mark's eyes, I realized now. And I saw something that made my heart skip. Suspicion, fear. She knew something was wrong even if she didn't understand what. "Emma," I said gently, "can you give your mom and me a few minutes to finish talking? There are cookies in the pantry if you're hungry." She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared upstairs. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close before continuing. "The school called me today," I said to Julia. "Seems Emma's been telling some interesting stories about her home life. Bruises that don't exist, misuse that never happened. Sound familiar?" Julia's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The guidance counselor wants to meet with both of us tomorrow. She's concerned about the inconsistencies in Emma's story. Apparently, our daughter isn't as good a liar as her mother. You can't prove anything." "I don't have to. The school has mandatory reporting requirements. They've already contacted Child Protective Services. Funny thing about false misuse allegations, they tend to backfire on the people making them." Julia sank into a kitchen chair, the fight going out of her like air from a punctured tire. "What do you want, Dean?" "I want my family back. I want the lies to stop. I want Mark out of our lives permanently. And if I can't give you that, then I keep escalating until you can." The next phase of the war began that weekend. Troy had been busy while I was dealing with Julia and Mark's immediate reactions. His contacts in the Army had provided some interesting information about Mark's service record, and his contacts at the IRS had been very interested in Julia's creative bookkeeping practices. "Mark's been having an affair with Colonel Martinez's wife," Troy told me during our Saturday morning meeting at a coffee shop across town. "Has been for about 6 months, apparently. The colonel doesn't know yet, but he's starting to suspect." "How does that help us?" "Because Martinez is the one who has to approve Mark's transfer request, and he's also the one who decides whether to recommend Mark for promotion to full colonel next year. A little anonymous tip about Mark's extracurricular activities, and suddenly your brother's military career hits a brick wall. Do it." "Already done. Martinez should get the photos Monday morning." "What about Julia?" Troy slid another folder across the table. "The IRS is very interested in her cash business. Turns out she's been underreporting income by about 40% for the past 3 years. That's felony tax evasion." "How long before they move?" "Could be weeks, could be months, but once they start auditing her, her business is effectively dead. No one wants to hire an event planner who's under federal investigation." I felt a grim satisfaction at the news, followed immediately by a stab of guilt. Julia was still the mother of the girls I'd raised as my own daughters. Destroying her meant hurting them too. But she'd made the choice to involve Emma in her lies. She'd been willing to destroy my relationship with the girls to protect her affair. Any collateral damage was on her, not me. "There's something else," Troy said. "I've been watching Mark's apartment. He's been meeting with a lawyer, divorce attorney from what I can tell. They're moving fast. Faster than we expected. I think your little photo distribution spooked them. They're going to try to get ahead of this, probably file for divorce and claim you're a controlling husband who's been stalking and harassing them." The pieces were falling into place. Julia and Mark weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to destroy me in the process. Paint me as the villain, take the girls, take the house, take everything, and leave me with nothing but a reputation as a controlling stalker. It was a good plan. It might have even worked if they'd been dealing with the old Dean, the trusting husband who believed the best of everyone. But the Dean was dead. The new Dean was smarter, meaner, and had nothing left to lose. "Time for the nuclear option," I told Troy. "You sure about this? Once we go public, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure." Troy nodded grimly. "Then let's burn it all down." The nuclear option was Emma's birthday party. My daughter, Mark's daughter, turned 15 on a Saturday in November. Julia had planned a big celebration, inviting Emma's friends, our extended family, and half the parents from Emma's school. It was going to be held at our house, the house Julia was planning to sell, with decorations Julia had bought using money she'd stolen from our joint accounts. It was perfect. I spent the week before the party making my own preparations. Troy helped me set up hidden cameras throughout the house, positioned to capture every conversation, every reaction, every moment of what was about to unfold. I also prepared a special slideshow for Emma's party photos and videos from her childhood, set to music, the kind of sentimental presentation that always made parents cry at milestone birthdays. Except this slideshow had some extra features Julia and Mark wouldn't be expecting. The party started at 2 o'clock on a beautiful Austin afternoon. Emma's friends arrived first, followed by the parents, followed by my adoptive family, Hank and Marlene Harlan, the people who'd chosen Mark over me, but still showed up for family events out of obligation. Mark arrived fashionably late, wearing his dress uniform and carrying an expensive present. He looked every inch the perfect uncle, the decorated war hero who doted on his nieces. Several of the mothers gave him appreciative looks as he worked the room, charming everyone with his easy smile and military bearing. Julia played the perfect hostess, flitting between groups of guests, making sure everyone had drinks and food, accepting compliments on the decorations in the house. She was wearing a new dress, probably bought with money she'd skimmed from our accounts, and she looked beautiful, confident, completely in control. They had no idea what was coming. I waited until everyone had gathered in the living room for the cake cutting. Emma was glowing with happiness, surrounded by friends and family, the center of attention on her special day. For a moment, I almost couldn't go through with it. She was just a kid, and what I was about to do would change her life forever. But then I saw Mark whisper something in Julia's ear that made her laugh, saw the intimate way they looked at each other, even in a room full of people, and my resolve hardened. They'd made this choice. They'd involved Emma in their lies. Whatever happened next was on them, not me. "Before we cut the cake," I announced, raising my voice to get everyone's attention, "I've put together a little slideshow of Emma's life. 15 years of memories to celebrate our amazing daughter." Emma beamed at me, and my heart broke a little. Whatever else happened, I did love her. I'd raised her, taught her to ride a bike, helped her with homework, cheered at her soccer games. Biology didn't change that. The slideshow started innocently enough. Baby photos, first steps, first day of school, family vacations. The guests oohed and awed at appropriate moments, and Emma blushed with embarrassment and pleasure. Then the photos started getting more recent. Emma with Mark at various events over the past 3 years. Emma calling him Daddy during their secret camping trip. Emma hugging him goodbye after one of their clandestine meetings. The room started to get uncomfortable. Parents began exchanging glances, sensing something was off, but not sure what. Then came the hotel photos. Julia and Mark holding hands in the lobby, Julia and Mark kissing in the elevator, Julia and Mark entering the same hotel room with timestamps showing they'd been there for hours. The room erupted. "Oh my God!" someone gasped. "Is that Julia and Mark? Are they?" Julia tried to lunge for the projector, but I was ready for her. I stepped between her and the equipment, my arms crossed, my expression calm. "Sit down, Julia," I said quietly. "We're not done yet." The slideshow continued. Email screenshots, text messages, financial records showing Julia moving money into secret accounts, DNA test results showing that both Emma and Zoe were Mark's biological children, not mine. By the time it was over, the room was dead silent, except for the sound of Emma crying. My 15-year-old daughter, the girl I'd loved and raised as my own for 8 years, was sobbing in her birthday dress, surrounded by her friends who were staring at her with a mixture of shock and pity. "You son of a witch!" Mark snarled, starting toward me. "I wouldn't," I said calmly, pulling out my phone. "I've got Austin PD on speed dial and about 50 witnesses who just watched you threaten me in my own home." Mark stopped, his hands clenched into fists, his face purple with rage. Julia was trying to comfort Emma, but our daughter, Mark's daughter, pushed her away. "Is it true?" Emma demanded, her voice breaking. "Is he my real father?" Julia looked around the room at all the staring faces, at the parents who would spread this story to every corner of Austin's social scene, at the smoking ruins of her carefully constructed life. "Emma, sweetheart, I can explain." "Is it true?" Emma screamed. Julia's shoulders sagged in defeat. "Yes!" The room exploded again, parents grabbing their children, heading for the exits, everyone talking at once. Within minutes, the party had cleared out except for family. Hank and Marlene Harlan stood in my living room, looking like they'd been hit by a truck. These people who'd chosen Mark, who'd made him their golden child, who'd always treated me like a poor substitute for their real son. "Dean," Marlene said shakily, "we had no idea." "Of course you didn't," I said. "You never bothered to look past Mark's perfect facade. You never wondered why he was so interested in spending time with my family. You just assumed your golden boy could do no wrong." "This is insane," Hank blustered. "Mark would never—" "Mark did," I said simply. "For years, and you enabled it by treating him like he was incapable of making mistakes." Emma was still crying, but now she was looking at me with something like understanding. "You knew," she said. "You've known for a while." "I found out recently," I admitted. "I'm sorry you had to learn this way, sweetheart, but your mother and Mark, they weren't going to tell you the truth. They were planning to take you and Zoe and disappear to Colorado, and I would never have seen you again." "So you decided to humiliate me in front of all my friends instead?" Emma's voice was raw with pain and anger. "I decided to stop the lies," I said. "I decided that you deserved to know the truth about your family, even if it hurt." Emma stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she turned and ran upstairs to her room, slamming the door behind her. Zoe had been quiet through the whole confrontation, sitting in the corner with her arms wrapped around her knees. Now she looked up at me with those serious 10-year-old eyes. "Are you still going to be my dad?" she asked in a small voice. The question hit me harder than anything else that had happened. I knelt down in front of her, taking her small hands in mine. "If you want me to be," I said. "Biology doesn't make a father, sweetheart. Love does. And I love you and Emma more than anything in the world," Zoe nodded solemnly. "Then you're still my dad." Behind us, Julia was sobbing into her hands while Mark stood frozen, staring at the wreckage of his military career, his relationship, and his family's reputation. "You've destroyed everything," Julia whispered. "Emma will never forgive you for this." "Emma will forgive me when she realizes I'm the only one who's been telling her the truth," I said. "You and Mark are the ones who destroyed this family. I just refuse to let you get away with it." Mark finally found his voice. "My career is over. My reputation is ruined. The whole base will know about this by Monday." "Good," I said. "Maybe the next time you decide to screw your brother's wife, you'll think about the consequences first." "We love each other," Mark said desperately. "We didn't plan for this to happen." "You planned for 8 months to betray me," I replied. "You planned to steal my daughters and my money and my house. You planned to destroy my life so you could build yours. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught." I looked around the room at the faces of the people who'd betrayed me. Julia, sobbing and broken. Mark, stunned and defeated. Hank and Marlene, finally seeing their golden child for what he really was. "Here's what's going to happen," I said calmly. "Mark, you're going to withdraw your transfer request and accept whatever punishment the Army gives you. Julia, you're going to move out of my house by the end of the week. You can take your clothes and your personal items, but everything else stays here. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, all of it stays with me and the girls." "You can't," Julia started. "I can and I will. I've got enough evidence of your financial fraud to put you in federal prison. The only reason I haven't turned it over to the IRS yet is because Emma and Zoe don't need to see their mother in handcuffs." "But," If you fight me on custody or try to take anything that doesn't belong to you, that evidence goes straight to the federal prosecutor. Julia stared at me with hatred and defeat warring in her eyes. As for visitation, I continued, you can see the girls on weekends, supervised, as long as Mark isn't involved. If I find out you've been using the girls to communicate with him or trying to turn them against me, all bets are off. The girls will hate you for this, Mark said. Maybe, I admitted, but they'll respect me for telling them the truth, and someday, when they're old enough to understand, they'll thank me for not letting you destroy their lives along with mine. I walked to the front door and opened it. Now, get out of my house, I said, both of you, and don't come back unless you're invited. Mark and Julia left without another word, followed by Hank and Marlene. I stood in my doorway and watched them drive away, taking with them the last remnants of the family I'd thought I had. Then I closed the door, turned off the lights, and went upstairs to check on my daughters. Emma's door was still locked, but I could hear her crying softly. I knocked gently. Emma, can we talk? Go away. I know you're angry, sweetheart. You have every right to be, but I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere. When you're ready to talk, I'll be ready to listen. No response, but the crying quieted a little. Zoe's room was dark, but she wasn't asleep. She was sitting by her window looking out at the street where Mark's car had disappeared. Hey, baby girl, I said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. How are you doing? Sad, she said simply, and confused. I know. It's a lot to process. Do you want to talk about it? Zoe was quiet for a long moment. Then, did you really build this house? Every room, I confirmed. Took me 2 years, working nights and weekends. And you built it for us, for me and Emma and Mom? I built it for my family, I said. And you and Emma are my family, no matter what anyone else says. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad you're my dad. You make the best pancakes. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Thanks, sweetheart. I love you too. I love you more, she said, and crawled into my lap for a hug. We sat there in the dark, holding each other, while the pieces of our shattered family slowly began to settle into a new configuration. It wasn't the family I'd planned for, wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was real in a way that the previous version had never been. No more lies, no more secrets, no more pretending, just truth, however painful, and whatever we could build from the wreckage. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Troy. Mark's been reassigned to a desk job at Fort Hood, he reported. No transfer, no promotion, no chance of advancement. His military career is effectively over. And Julia? The IRS audit started yesterday. Her business is finished, and she's looking at serious jail time if they decide to prosecute. Word is she's trying to negotiate a plea deal. I felt a grim satisfaction at the news, but no real joy. Destroying them hadn't brought back the family I'd lost. It had just ensured that they couldn't hurt anyone else the way they'd hurt me. Any regrets? Troy asked. I thought about Emma, who was slowly starting to talk to me again, who was seeing a therapist to help process the betrayal and confusion of learning that her entire life had been built on lies. I thought about Zoe, who seemed to be adjusting better than anyone, who still crawled into my lap for bedtime stories and still called me daddy without any hesitation. I thought about the house I'd built with my own hands, the business I'd grown from nothing, the life I was rebuilding one day at a time. No, I said finally. No regrets. They tried to destroy me, tried to take everything I'd worked for and leave me with nothing. Instead, they'd lost everything while I kept what mattered most, my daughter's love, my self-respect, and the truth. In the end, that was enough.